The Cosmic Dance of Self. Part 1. The Questioning. Sarah opened her eyes to the soft glow of dawn creeping through her curtains. Another day, another moment in the endless cycle of wake, work, sleep. She sighed, her hand reflexively reaching for her phone on the nightstand. As the screen illuminated, bathing her face in its cold, blue light, she paused. Why do I do this? She wondered, not for the first time. The thought hung in the air, suspended like dust motes in the early morning sunbeam. It wasn't just about checking her phone. It was about everything. The routines, the habits, the unquestioned patterns that made up the tapestry of her life. Sarah sat up, letting the covers pool around her waist. The room seemed different somehow, as if the familiar objects, the dresser, the mirror, the potted plant by the window, were slightly out of alignment with her memories. She shook her head, trying to clear the fog of sleep, but the feeling persisted. As she went about her morning routine, shower, coffee, toast, each action felt both automatic and strangely deliberate. It was as if she were both the puppeteer and the puppet, simultaneously pulling the strings and feeling them tug at her limbs. On her commute to work, Sarah found herself studying her fellow passengers on the subway. A businessman in a crisp suit, eyes glued to his tablet. An elderly woman knitting, her gnarled fingers moving with surprising grace. A teenager with multicolored hair, lost in the world behind their headphones. Each person a universe unto themselves, yet all sharing this metal tube hurtling through the underground. Who are you all? Sarah mused silently. Who am I in relation to you? Are we truly separate? Or is that just another illusion? The questions multiplied like rabbits in her mind, each one giving birth to a litter of new uncertainties. By the time she arrived at her office, Sarah felt as if she were walking through a dream, every sensation both vivid and unreal. Her coworker, Tom, greeted her with his usual cheerful, "Morning, Sarah, ready to tackle the Johnson account." Sarah opened her mouth to give her usual reply, but what came out instead was, "Tom, do you ever wonder if we're all just playing parts in some cosmic drama? Like, what if our real selves are somewhere else, watching this unfold?" Tom's smile faltered for a moment, then broadened. "Wow, someone's been hitting the philosophy books. Or did you start your weekend early?" He chuckled and moved on, leaving Sarah standing there, feeling both foolish and strangely exhilarated. Throughout the day, Sarah found it increasingly difficult to focus on her work. Spreadsheets and emails seemed like artifacts from another world, one she was rapidly losing touch with. Instead, her mind kept circling back to fundamental questions. Who am I really? What is the nature of this reality I perceive? Is there a purpose to all of this? Or are we just complex patterns of energy playing out in an indifferent universe? As the afternoon wore on, Sarah felt a growing urge to break free from her routine, to do anything different. When the clock finally struck 5, instead of heading to her usual yoga class, she found herself walking in the opposite direction, toward the old part of town she rarely visited. The streets here were narrower, the buildings a mishmash of architectural styles spanning centuries. Sarah wandered aimlessly, letting her feet carry her where they would. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows and painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she came upon a small, curious shop wedged between a modern coffee house and a boarded-up former bakery. The sign above the door read "Echoes of Eternity" in faded gold lettering. The window display was a jumble of odd objects. Crystals, old books, masks from various cultures, and what looked like scientific instruments from another era. Something about the shop called to Sarah, tugging at her like an invisible thread. Before she could second-guess herself, she pushed open the door. A small bell tinkled overhead, announcing her entrance. The interior was dimly lit and smelled of incense and old paper. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with an eclectic assortment of items that defied easy categorization. "Welcome, seeker," came a voice from the shadows at the back of the shop. Sarah startled, peering into the gloom. An old man emerged, his white hair wild and his eyes twinkling with an inner light that seemed at odds with his advanced years. I didn't come here looking for anything specific," Sarah stammered. The old man's smile deepened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Ah, but those who think they aren't seeking are often the ones seeking the most. Tell me, what questions burn in your heart today?" Sarah hesitated, then found herself pouring out the thoughts that had been plaguing her all day. The old man listened attentively, nodding occasionally as if her words confirmed something he already knew. When she finished, slightly out of breath and feeling somewhat ridiculous, the old man turned and rummaged through a drawer behind the counter. He produced a small, intricately carved wooden box. "Perhaps this will help you on your journey," he said, holding out the box to Sarah. She took it hesitantly. "What is it?" "Open it when you're ready to see beyond the veil of ordinary perception," the old man replied cryptically. "But be warned, once you start down this path, there's no turning back. The world as you know it will never be the same." Sarah left the shop in a daze, the box clutched tightly in her hands. As she made her way home through the deepening twilight, the city seemed to shimmer around her, as if reality itself were a thin veneer that could peel away at any moment. In her apartment, Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at the box. Part of her wanted to open it immediately, while another part feared what might happen if she did. What if this was all just the beginning of a mental breakdown? What if opening the box somehow shattered the comfortable illusions that had defined her life until now? As the night deepened around her, Sarah realized that she had already crossed a threshold. The very fact that she was questioning everything meant that she could never go back to her unexamined life. With trembling fingers, she opened the box. Inside was a single piece of paper, blank except for 7 words written in flowing script. "To find yourself, you must lose yourself." As Sarah read the words, the world around her began to blur and shift. The boundaries of her room seemed to melt away, and she felt herself falling, spinning, dissolving into a vast, swirling cosmos of infinite possibility. Sarah's journey had truly begun. Part 2, the unraveling. Sarah felt as if she were falling through the fabric of reality itself. Colors swirled around her, sounds became visible, and thoughts took on tangible form. She was everywhere and nowhere, every when and now hen. As suddenly as it began, the sensation stopped. Sarah found herself standing on what appeared to be a vast, mirror-like surface stretching infinitely in all directions. The sky above was a kaleidoscope of shifting hues, like an aurora borealis encompassing the entire heavens. Well, came a familiar voice. "Looks like someone's finally decided to wake up." Sarah turned to see herself, or rather countless versions of herself stretching as far as the eye could see. Some were older, some younger. Some wore clothes from different eras, while others were dressed in garments she couldn't even begin to describe. What is this place?" Sarah asked, her voice echoing strangely in the infinite space. The Sarah standing closest to her, dressed in a flowing robe that seemed to be woven from starlight, smiled. "This is everywhere and nowhere, the place between places, the time between times. Welcome to the edges of your own consciousness, Sarah." "But how can this be real?" Sarah protested. "Am I dreaming? Have I gone mad?" The robed Sarah laughed, a sound like tinkling crystal. "Oh, my dear, what is madness but a different way of perceiving reality? And what is reality but a shared dream we all agree to believe in?" As she spoke, the mirrored surface beneath their feet began to ripple, forming images that moved and shifted. Sarah saw glimpses of her life, past, present, and possible futures, all playing out simultaneously. "You see," continued her guide, "what you've thought of as you is just the tip of the iceberg. The conscious mind, the ego, is merely a tiny fragment of your true self. It's like a single wave thinking it's separate from the ocean." Sarah watched, mesmerized, as the scenes in the mirror shifted and changed. She saw herself as a child, full of wonder and possibility. She saw alternate versions of her adult self, one a celebrated artist, another a teacher, yet another a mother of 3. She saw herself old and gray, reflecting on a life well lived. "Are all of these me?" she asked, overwhelmed by the possibilities. "In a manner of speaking, yes," replied her guide. "They are all potential expressions of your being. But even this multitude of selves is just the beginning. Look deeper." As Sarah concentrated, the images began to blur and merge. She saw beyond the confines of her individual lives to the vast web of connections linking her to every other being. She saw how her actions, her very thoughts, sent ripples through the fabric of existence, affecting countless others in ways she could never have imagined. "You see," said the guide, "the idea of a separate self is the grandest illusion of all. It's a useful fiction for navigating the physical world, but it's not the deepest truth. In reality, we are all interconnected, all part of the same cosmic dance." As if to illustrate this point, the myriad reflections of Sarah began to dance. It started slowly, a gentle swaying that gradually built into a whirling, joyous celebration. Sarah felt herself drawn into the dance, her body moving of its own accord. As she danced, she began to feel the boundaries of herself dissolving. She was the dancer and the dance, the music and the silence between the notes. She was the starlight and the void, the breath and the breather. In that moment of unity, Sarah understood what Alan Watts meant when he said, "You are a function of what the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing." The dance reached a crescendo, and suddenly Sarah found herself alone again with her guide on the mirrored plane. But she no longer felt alone in the way she once had. The sense of isolation, of being a separate entity adrift in an uncaring universe, had vanished. "What you've experienced," said the guide gently, "is just a glimpse of the true nature of reality, but it's a start." "But what do I do with this knowledge?" Sarah asked, still reeling from the experience. "How do I live in the everyday world knowing what I now know?" The guide's smile turned enigmatic. "Ah, now that's the real question, isn't it? The challenge is to dance between the worlds, to remember the unity while playing the game of separation. To act in the world with purpose and compassion, all the while knowing that it's all a grand cosmic play." As she spoke, the mirror beneath their feet began to crack. Sarah felt a moment of panic, but her guide remained serene. "Don't be afraid," she said. "Remember, destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. What seems like an ending is often just a new beginning." The cracks spread, and suddenly the mirrored surface shattered completely. Sarah felt herself falling once again, but this time she surrendered to the sensation, trusting in the flow of existence. She fell through layers of reality, catching glimpses of worlds and dimensions beyond her comprehension. She saw the birth and death of universes, the dance of subatomic particles, the slow turning of galaxies. She experienced time not as a linear progression but as an eternal now, where past, present, and future coexisted. Throughout it all, a phrase echoed in her mind. "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." Sarah understood now that no words could adequately capture the ineffable nature of existence, could only be experienced, lived, danced. As the kaleidoscope of realities whirled around her, Sarah became aware of a rhythmic sound growing louder. Thump, 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 thump. It took her a moment to recognize it as the beating of her own heart. With a gasp, Sarah's eyes flew open. She was back in her bedroom, the first light of dawn creeping through her window. The wooden box lay open on her lap, the slip of paper with its cryptic message still inside. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination, or something more? Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs. The world around her looked the same as it always had, and yet, everything had changed. The objects in her room, the sounds from the street outside, even the sensation of her own body, all seemed more vivid, more real, and paradoxically, more dreamlike than ever before. She rose from her bed, moving to the window. As she looked out at the city awakening, she saw it with new eyes. The people on the street, the birds in the trees, the clouds in the sky, all were individual expressions of the same underlying unity. The cosmic dance was everywhere, if only one knew how to see it. Sarah smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace wash over her. She didn't have all the answers, indeed. She now understood that the mystery of existence was far too vast to ever be fully comprehended by the rational mind. But she had glimpsed something profound, something that would change the course of her life. As she prepared for her day, Sarah realized that her journey was just beginning. The challenge now was to integrate this cosmic perspective into her everyday life. How could she navigate the mundane world of jobs and bills and social obligations while maintaining her connection to the infinite? She picked up her phone, staring at the screen for a moment before putting it back down. The emails and social media updates could wait. Instead, she sat down on her meditation cushion, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. As she centered herself, Sarah silently vowed to approach each moment, each interaction, each task, as an opportunity to remember and express the unity she had experienced. She would strive to see the divine in the ordinary, the extraordinary in the mundane. The cosmic dance continued, and Sarah was ready to play her part. Part 3, the integration. As Sarah stepped out of her apartment building, the city seemed to pulse with a new vitality. The morning sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, its light catching on windows and creating a dazzling display. She paused for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the air fill her lungs and appreciating the simple miracle of existence. Her commute, once a dreaded part of her day, became an opportunity for mindful observation. On the subway, she studied her fellow passengers with newfound curiosity and compassion. The businessman anxiously checking his watch, the young mother soothing a fussy child, the street performer with calloused hands clutching a guitar case. Sarah saw them all as unique expressions of the cosmic dance, each playing their part in the grand tapestry of life. At work, Sarah found herself approaching tasks with a sense of detached engagement. She completed her assignments efficiently, but without the stress and anxiety that had once plagued her. When her boss criticized a report she'd submitted, instead of feeling defensive or upset, Sarah listened with genuine interest, seeing the feedback as an opportunity for growth rather than a personal attack. "You seem different today," Tom remarked during their lunch break. "More relaxed somehow. Did something happen?" Sarah smiled enigmatically. "You could say I've had a change in perspective," she replied. "I've realized that there's more to life than just our day-to-day concerns." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Careful," he joked. "Talk like that might make people think you're going all new age on us." Sarah laughed, but inwardly she wondered how she could possibly explain her experience to someone who hadn't shared it. How could mere words convey the profound sense of unity and interconnectedness she now felt? As the days passed, Sarah found herself naturally altering her habits and routines. She began to meditate regularly, started taking long walks in nature, and found herself drawn to books on philosophy and spirituality. She even signed up for a yoga class, finding that the practice helped her maintain a sense of bodily awareness and presence. But integrating her cosmic insights into everyday life wasn't always easy. Sarah struggled with feelings of isolation, unable to fully share her experiences with friends and family who hadn't undergone similar awakenings. When she tried to explain her new perspective to her sister during their weekly phone call, she was met with concern and skepticism. "Sarah, are you sure you're okay?" her sister asked. "You're not involved in some kind of cult, are you?" No, nothing like that," Sarah assured her. "I've just gained a new appreciation for life, that's all." But even as she said the words, Sarah felt the inadequacy of language to convey her true meaning. How could she explain that she now saw all of existence as a kind of cosmic cult, each being unknowingly worshiping at the altar of unity through the very act of living? The greatest challenge came a few weeks after her initial awakening. Sarah was walking through the park, reveling in the beauty of the autumn leaves, when she came across a group of protesters. They were demonstrating against a new city ordinance that would displace a homeless encampment. Sarah felt a surge of compassion for both the protesters and those they were trying to protect. In her expanded state of awareness, she could see the complex web of causes and conditions that had led to this situation: the systemic inequalities, the personal struggles, the well-intentioned but flawed policies. For a moment, she was overwhelmed by the seeming contradiction between the unity she had experienced and the discord she was witnessing. If all was one, how could there be such conflict and suffering? As she stood there, grappling with this paradox, Sarah remembered something her guide had said in that strange, mirrored realm. The challenge is to dance between the worlds, to remember the unity while playing the game of separation. With sudden clarity, Sarah understood that acknowledging the fundamental interconnectedness of all things didn't mean ignoring the relative reality of the world. In fact, it called for greater engagement, greater compassion. Without fully knowing what she was going to do, Sarah approached the group. She listened to their concerns, offered words of support, and then found herself volunteering to help organize a community meeting to address the issue. As she worked with the protesters and later with city officials, Sarah found herself drawing on her newfound perspective. She was able to see beyond entrenched positions, to find common ground where others saw only conflict. Her ability to remain calm and centered, even in heated discussions, had a noticeable effect on those around her. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah found herself becoming more involved in community activism. She started a meditation group at her office, which surprisingly grew to include even the most stressed-out executives. She volunteered at a local food bank, seeing each interaction as an opportunity to recognize the divine in every person she served. But even as she engaged more fully with the world, Sarah never lost sight of the greater reality she had glimpsed. She learned to move fluidly between the absolute and the relative, the cosmic and the mundane. In quiet moments, she would often return to that sense of boundless unity, letting it infuse her actions in the world. One evening, as she was leaving a community meeting, Sarah found herself drawn to the old shop where her journey had begun. The sign Echoes of Eternity glowed softly in the twilight, seeming to beckon her. The bell tinkled as she entered, and the familiar scent of incense greeted her. The old man was there, arranging crystals on a shelf. He turned and smiled, his eyes twinkling with recognition. "Ah, the seeker returns," he said warmly. "And what have you found on your journey?" Sarah took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. "I found that the journey itself is the destination," she said finally. "That every moment is an opportunity to remember our true nature, and to act from that place of unity and compassion." The old man nodded approvingly. "And what will you do with this wisdom?" Sarah smiled. "Keep dancing," she said simply. As she turned to leave, her eye caught something on a nearby shelf. It was a small figurine of Shiva Nutraja, the lord of the dance, poised in eternal motion within a ring of fire. The old man followed her gaze. "Ah, yes," he said, "the cosmic dancer who performs his dance to destroy a weary universe and then reconstitute it with new relevance. A fitting symbol for one who has glimpsed the true nature of reality, wouldn't you say?" Sarah nodded, feeling a resonance with the figure. On impulse, she purchased it, knowing it would serve as a reminder of her ongoing journey. As she left the shop, the figurine tucked safely in her bag, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood now that awakening wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Every day offered new opportunities to deepen her understanding, to dance more gracefully between the worlds of unity and multiplicity. The city night stretched out before her, a symphony of lights and shadows, sounds and silences. And in every face she passed, in every stone and tree and star, Sarah saw reflections of the infinite dance of existence. She took a deep breath, feeling profoundly grateful for the mystery and beauty of it all. Then, with a smile on her lips and a spring in her step, Sarah continued on her way, ready to embrace whatever the cosmic dance might bring next. If you are not already asleep, keep your eyes closed and let the music carry you away into the land of dreams.